Trampled Underfoot podcast show coming at you live. It is Tuesday, the 23rd of April, 2024. Your hosts are Mark Lindsay and Eloy Escajedo. Welcome aboard. Choo choo.
Chugga wugga, chugga wugga, woo chugga.
So I'll just say one thing as a I ran into a mini video like the ones they have on Facebook,
Oh, okay, yeah, short, yeah.
and they were mentioning a site
Mhm.
where you can. It's got a globe like Google Earth
Uh-huh.
with a lot of little pins on it
Okay.
around the world in each city that has a radio station available.
Oh, cool.
So you can surf the earth
Hmm.
in this graphical way,
Mm.
click on each little dot, and it'll open up the transmission so you could hear the different places. So at first,
So, wait a minute. Let me make sure I got this right. So you can go to, say, you want to see what's going on in the UK right now. You can
Mhm.
go over to the UK and then click on it, and you'll can actually listen to a radio station that's broadcasting over there now.
at the time.
That's cool.
So and it's got like a Google Earth interface.
Hmm.
So you can navigate around it just like Google Earth.
Hmm.
Um, and so the first thing that I did was I said, well, let me see what's happening in my dad's birthplace, his
Hmm.
town in
Hmm.
Cuba. So I went down, and there wasn't one in his town. There's one in his little in the um, province.
Hmm.
So I clicked on it, or there's a couple of them,
Hmm.
and they were playing some pop music that you'd hear in the United States.
Really?
Yeah, like the very terrible pop that you with not trying to take away your free will, but if I were to guess or put money down to see what you would say, I
Hmm.
would say that you would categorize it. I don't want to take away. Maybe you do love that, but in any event, which I know you don't, but so I'm being very, very risky here.
Yeah,
It
don't worry.
was that cheap
Hmm.
pop,
Hmm.
okay, and I said, man, fuck, fa 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 la la. Anyway, see that's how emotion. So I left it, and then I went up
Hmm.
to Florida,
Hmm.
to Miami.
Hmm.
Said, you know what? Let's hear what's. And I clicked on one of our stations, same the crap like that pop thing. I was like,
Hmm.
what the hell?
Modern pop music?
Yeah, like modern,
Okay, but not pop from like the 60s, 70s, 80s or anything like that. Just
modern,
hmm
lifeless,
soulless.
soulless,
Hmm.
harsh. Anyways, so I swung the globe over. So let's go to Europe,
Hmm.
and I went into Cantabria specifically,
Hmm.
and I clicked in the locations closest to where my ancestors are from. And one of them was talking about football, like
Hmm.
soccer,
Hmm.
like very into soccer
Oh,
in Spanish.
definitely.
Like they were very like talking about the situation and this and that. And I was like, oh well, but that's cool. But then the other places, and
Same thing, huh?
I was like, what the? I was like, what? And so I left there, and then I went up to France,
Hmm.
and I clicked on France
Hmm.
somewhere in southern France, and dude, it had this not quite rock. It was like a '60s modern version with a tremolo guitar, like ring, ding, 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 and like a French person. Oh, it actually sounded cool. I don't know what the hell they were saying, but the point is, it sounded like whoa, this is getting into '60s type territory.
Uh-huh.
And I said, let's go across the pond.
Hmm.
And I went right over to. I looked at for Jamie Page's little area
Hmm.
in the Kent, Broadstairs,
Hmm.
Margate um, area, and I clicked on it, and the song started, and I was like, man, this is like some cool British stuff that harkens back to the '60s. And then in the first few lines of the song, it went tick, 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 tick into the cheap stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So they had a little good start, and I was like, what the hell? And so I left there and I swung the last one because this is actually where I stopped.
Mm-hmm.
And I swung it over. I ended up in like Croatia,
Mm-hmm.
and I clicked it. And dude, the only decent place that I found music was in Croatia. Croatia had, it almost felt like, those old, I hate to make this association, but since I'm not
Yeah.
from Eastern, broadly
Mm-hmm.
Europe,
Yeah.
Central, I don't have reference points. But if I made a reference point,
Mm-hmm.
those old German folk songs,
Yeah.
like with beer and like
Mm-hmm.
piano and
Accordion and
yeah,
all the other good stuff. Yeah.
that's what they were playing, that style. And it felt like it had soul.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, man, this is good. It almost felt like, remember Whiskey Song by The Doors? Show
Yep.
me the way. And
Whiskey bar. Yeah.
it had that carnival feel, but it's more like
Mm-hmm.
what I'm saying with the German thing. I was like, man, this is freaking good.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, in the freaking Western Hemisphere, so anyways,
Well, remember, like I said, American pop culture goes everywhere.
it's
But
incredible.
yeah, I mean, it's
I wouldn't call it, well, I
yeah,
wouldn't call
but
it
the
culture.
styles, the style it travels. I mean, it goes all over the place. It's done in their language, and they make references to their kind of stuff. But yeah, it's it's the style.
I was
It
amazed.
it still freaks me out. I still find it funny to watch British television and see British rappers talking about music because you don't make that association. You don't make the association of rap music in Great Britain. And it's hilarious to me to see these people with accents trying to be all street, you know. And it's just like, dude, it doesn't work. It
Well,
really doesn't work. Now
I
it does
agree.
there, but it doesn't translate well, is what I'm
Well,
getting
I
at.
agree to a point, but if you put something in like the British invasion of the 60s,
Hmm.
they did it then too.
But
They
but
took,
but they were developing a style as well.
yeah, but so are these people in their
Hmm.
respective whatever. I mean, we don't care
Well,
for the music, but no, we don't know I don't know the I can't. I don't know about you, but
mhm.
I don't know the difference between one rap thing or the. I mean, I could
Yeah, I
work on
don't
it.
really either, but that's why I giggle about it, not giggle, but I chuckle about it so much, is because it's almost like they're trying too hard to be American.
The Beatles were doing that too. You may not see it from your vantage point, but okay, Great Britain and the UK in general,
Mhm.
that 60s revolution was an American thing that originates
Oh yeah.
in
Hmm.
African American music.
Yeah.
And
Blues
yet,
blues and jazz had a baby and they named it rock and roll. Yes.
so England had, if we use that as a standard, a lot of people would have back then said, "What the heck is it?" I mean, they so you see what I'm saying? Like,
I do see what you're saying, but also I the only reason I'm kind of hesitating and bouncing back and forth was because they had a distinct British style. You could not confuse Chubby Checker with the Beatles or the Rolling Stones or the Kinks. You could not confuse. The style was different.
yeah, but you liked
So
the music,
so much so that bands like the Byrds, the Beau Brummels, the Dave Clark Five,
then copied them.
they copied the Beatles because they came with that new style that was different from American rock and roll.
Yeah, but you like
Hmm.
rock and roll.
Yeah.
You don't care for, as far as I don't care. I'll not use you, but I kind of feel safe that I can actually drag you into this one, but maybe I'm wrong, and you
Yeah,
could because there could
I'm
be.
not a huge fan of the hip hop. No.
I would even go further for me, but anyways, I could. Say, but in any event, I don't qualify the specifics of these people, singing whatnot and this and that
Hmm.
under the category of rap. However, if you tell me about rock and roll, I'll get into it like you just did. But if you think about radio, if you think about, so I made the distinction of what I'm thinking that's happening here with what you're saying. Um, I'm more invested in the rock and roll throughout my life, so I could see all those differences you're saying.
Hmm.
But I wouldn't even know where to begin with rap other than it's gangster rap music, and that's all I know.
Hmm. Well, my point is this was that the Beatles didn't come over and try to become American. Neither did the Stones. Neither did the Kinks. They didn't come over and try to be American. What I think is funny about the UK rappers is a lot of them are trying to sound American, but I think they're trying too hard,
No, dude, wait a
and
second.
it doesn't translate.
Okay, I have a problem with this though because I
How
would
so?
argue the well, it's not really a problem, but since we're
Hmm.
talking about it,
Sure.
let's um it's not really a big deal, but um I would say the opposite. See, now it's like you stole all the outrage. I would say I'm trying to um it really doesn't matter, does it? But I would say you just zapped all the oxygen out of it. I would say that the Beatles were doing the opposite because if you think about their first albums,
Hmm.
they were mostly American covers.
But some
Um,
of it was, yeah. But please, please me, I want to hold your hand. They
no,
didn't,
that was the next album. The first
right?
album,
But they didn't try to be American.
yes, that's what I'm trying to say. How can I? Please,
Well,
please me was a
in
bite off of Roy Orbison.
okay, well, in what I'm getting at is the music. They may have copied a few styles, and yes, I know all four of them just idolized Roy Orbison.
And the Crickets, Buddy
Uh,
Holly.
right, but what I'm getting at is they in their personal lives when you see them in interviews and things like that. That's four guys from Liverpool. There's no ifs and or buts. They're not trying to act American, trying to affect a fake accent or anything like that. But when I watch the British rappers on TV, they are trying way too hard
Wait a
to
second.
be like South Side of Chicago or Detroit or something like that.
You
And it's
can
just
you
hilarious to
how
listen to them talk.
how much
Is that doggy in the window? What?
how much of British rap have you consumed to say
Not much at all. But in listening to these interviews, they're guests on certain shows that I like to watch. And listening to them talk, it's like, dude, you've never been in Atlanta. You've never been to Detroit. Quit trying to make quit trying to be American. It's okay to be yourself, you
so
know?
you're not focusing on because when the
No,
Beatles were
I'm not focusing on the music.
you're saying about the whole backdrop of what they're producing as far
Hmm.
as their attitudes and whatnot.
Hmm. It's
Well,
kind of like remember Vanilla Ice trying to come off as being all Mr. Street and I'm from the hood and this, that, and the other. And it turns out he the only hood he ever had was on his jacket.
he was from Miami, Fort Lauderdale area.
I know exactly.
No, but we
He
do have
he
hoods here.
well, but he didn't grow up poor. And he was just he 100% fake, which is why he would did this real quick. His career crashed almost as fast as it took off, but people saw through him like used Neutrogena soap.
But I
I don't know,
mean,
it's that plastic banana trying to be cool hip rock and roller thing that just it don't fly. It's dude, don't try so hard, just be yourself. If you're good, you're good, just be yourself.
yeah, but like I don't know about rap, dude. I think that I can't even qualify because my experience of it, I did like Rum DNC back in the 80s. I bought one of their albums.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, you're one ahead of me. I did like the song they did with Aerosmith, but I liked it because it was Aerosmith.
I grew up in an era where rap came out,
Hmm.
so it naturally came into the picture. But I'd always return to rock,
Hmm.
although I had some rap that I would listen to, like the Beastie Boys. They were white boys or whatever from New York,
Hmm.
and yet they kicked butt. And like they
I,
didn't,
I
they
don't know
kicked
much
butt.
about them. I don't know much about them. I know that one song, "Fight for Your Right to Party," and that's about it. But because that you couldn't, when that came out, you couldn't get away from it. That was one another one of those songs that was playing all over the place. So okay, fine. But I never bought any of their records. I never listened to anything other than that. They just weren't on my top 10 list at the time.
No, the whole
So,
persona backdrop,
hmm.
having to match the music and all that, like difficulty,
Hmm.
um, to appease I don't know what public at large. I get that. That's not actually. I'll take that back. I was gonna say that's not from our eras, but it was totally from our eras too, just
Yeah.
in a different. Like they've always manufactured a story.
Hmm.
Who said "Get off my lawn"?
Well, Dan Haryu said you guys sound like old men, you know. And Jim beat me to it because I was going to say, Dan, get off my lawn.
Well, number one, if you guys in your respective near to us eras,
Mhm,
a decade or so, whatever. In
mhm,
Dan's case, he's a whole year older than
mhm,
I. So we're very much in the
mhm.
same pocket of music thing. Um, don't sit there, Harju. And by the way, ruin my best thoughts of you by saying that you have this whole tapestry collection of all the different rap
Yeah,
genres because you can't hold back and enjoy. Don't tell me get off my or no that was
that was Jim that said get off my lawn. But what I think is funny, you guys sound like old men. This from a guy who has like 11 milk crates full of records at his shop. And we went through Dan's record collection one night. He was pulling out album after album after album. So,
I mean, it's a difficult one and all this and that. I don't know if you guys like
mhm,
Doc Roll and Arju
mhm,
are like reading frickin' the latest teen idol pop magazines off the rack for your the newest latest hits.
mhm,
I know I haven't done that since like literally the 80s when you would go into a store and they would be there and you'd see like Ozzy.
mhm,
Then but that's a lie. Anytime I see Paul McCartney in one of those Life magazine
mhm.
like one-offs that they do,
Yeah.
I'll grab that.
Well,
I
yeah,
will.
there are certain people that you're going to follow. I mean, I never bought Guitar Magazine or Guitar Player Magazine or anything, but if I saw Stevie Ray Vaughan on the cover, I would check it out. I may not buy it, but I'd check it out to see what they were saying about him.
If
Or
you're gonna
Jimi
read it,
Hendrix or Tommy Iommi or somebody like that. Tony Iommi, excuse me. But there were certain performers. If I saw someone that I really liked or looked up to or admired or something like that. I had Jim Croce music books because I loved the stories he told about the songs. You know, uh, the Life and Times songbook. Before every song, you'd have the sheet music there with all the lyrics and everything. But before the song, there'd be one or two pages about that song and about the people that he knew that inspired the song or a feeling that he had or one of those things. So you weren't really it wasn't really a mystery what the song was about because he explained it before the sheet music and the lyrics. And I didn't play anything, but I still wanted it because I liked the stories he told.
don't think about it. Don't think about it. Just answer it with whatever comes up, first or second, but quick.
Hmm.
Favorite Beach Boys song?
That's a tough one because there are a whole bunch of them.
First
Believe it
one
or
that
not,
popped.
help me, Rhonda.
Okay, mine would be, um, oh crap.
But there are so
Let Him
many.
Run Wild. Let Him Run Wild, that song from
Yeah.
way back. The
Hmm.
mono and stereo version.
Hmm.
Actually, the mono version, something special happened there. Favorite Beatles song? Quick, don't think.
Favorite Beatles? Quick, don't see. It's you can't narrow it down to
I
one,
can't
man.
tell you don't think because then you start thinking.
All of side two of Abbey Road.
No,
All
that's cheating.
side
One
two.
song. Okay, fine.
Here comes the sun.
Okay.
But I truly, honestly believe, and this is my own bias here. You want to talk about biases? I truly believe side two of Abbey Road in vinyl is one of the best engineered albums ever. I can drop the needle at the beginning of side two, sit down in a chair, and just get lost. I love it. I still think it's one of the best engineered albums ever.
I'm pretty fond of. I like all their albums, but to be honest with you, the least favorite of mine, and it's still good because it's got some good ones, is the Magical Mystery Tour.
Yeah.
Oh no, I'm sorry. Yellow Submarine. Those two
I
albums. I'm not too like wow, even though they have great stuff in them, but I'm not too keen on that. Like but their early stuff, their first album,
mhm,
I I like all their albums, but their first album was so hidden into a previous era of what would become the Beatles. I love it because
mhm.
the next album was freaking awesome, which was with the Beatles, I think it was. Um,
Well,
and then
I had introducing the Beatles. Then what was the one after that?
I
I
don't
had the
go by
first
the
two.
I don't go by the records
Mhm,
how they came out in America. I go by the records as they're jointly or British or something to that effect. It starts with Please Please Me.
mhm,
It goes into With the Beatles. It goes Beatles for Sale.
mhm,
And then I believe the next one is Help.
mhm.
What was their other movie? It was
Oh, Hard Day's Night.
okay, Hard Day's Night and Help.
Yeah, Help came
Help
out in
was
like 64, 65, something like that.
Hard Day's Night was first.
Hmm.
Help came after. Somewhere in that era, then came out Rubber Soul, and all bets were off.
Yeah, Rubber Soul was a good album. Still is. Very good album.
When Rubber Soul, when I first heard, because obviously I'm talking,
Hmm.
when I heard it for the first time, I couldn't believe what I was listening to.
Yeah.
Not that it was radical like Jimi Hendrix
Well,
to me,
if
but
if I'm not mistaken, that was the first one that Norman Smith produced. It was the engineer on, rather, not producer, engineer. I may be wrong,
I don't remember those details now. But it's
but
been a while.
their whole sound changed up. But what was the first Beatles album you bought?
I bought a Beatle. It was called Love, and what it was a compilation of all
Mm-hmm.
their love songs.
Mm-hmm.
And because I was learning how to write songs on acoustic, and I figured the best way to do that is to copy
Mm-hmm.
what love songs the Beatles, because I had heard a few Beatles
Mm-hmm.
songs, and I said, oh, I got to get this. So I went to the mall
Mm-hmm.
and saw this one that says love song compilation, all the good stuff. It had a brown cover
Mm-hmm.
on it, and her image was like a stamped image of the four of them.
Yeah.
I got that.
Okay. Okay. Linda said the first one was her first was Revolver. My first was Sergeant Pepper. And then after that, I'm like, oh man, because I'd heard a few songs off of Sergeant Pepper, but I'd never heard the whole album. So I bought it, played hell out of it, then went down the next week when I got my allowance and got Abbey Road. And that one is stuck with me. Oh my God, that one is stuck with me. I still love that entire album, but side two to me is a masterpiece. Then jumped on Let It Be, and then White Album, then started going back into the old stuff, Rubber Soul, Revolver. I do remember they had two album collections. One had a red cover, one had a blue cover, and it was four pictures of them on a staircase looking down at the camera.
Yeah.
Um, I got the red album, then I bought a bunch of other stuff and just basically went all over the place.
I can't even tell you the first time I listened to Sergeant Pepper's because it's rated not for the show, but it was so insane.
Hmm.
I was skipping school,
Hmm. Oh, okay.
and it goes wild. Um, and I was like a teenager.
Hmm.
But I wasn't the same after that one.
Yeah. Well, what interested me in Sergeant Pepper was, I mean, I'd heard the Beatles on the radio and everything, but I was not a devoted fan. I just was, whatever. I was scattered to the four winds. And um, all of a sudden, that Elton John covered Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. And I thought, wait a minute, that's a Beatles song. What's he doing? That's a Beatles song. And so I went to the record shop and I looked it up and I bought Sergeant Pepper because of Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. And then I found a whole bunch of other tunes on that album. And I'm like, man, this is good stuff. Then I
my
went and
first
got Abbey Road.
my first foray, other than the radio, but of purchasing of stuff from the early '60s.
Mm-hmm.
I was a teenager, barely, or even younger. No, bull.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't even a teenager. I was a little kid,
Yeah.
and I bought myself, with my parents' money,
Mm-hmm.
a compilation of the Beach Boys. Because one time I heard the Beach Boys play on the radio,
Mm-hmm.
doing the barbershop voices,
Mm-hmm.
and I said, "There's got to be something to this." And I went and bought the whole thing,
Mm-hmm.
the best of.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't believe it. I could not believe what I was listening to. A lot of people would say, "Oh, but that's kind of square, those
That
people,"
was surfer music. Yeah.
compared to what all the cool stuff. But to me,
Mm-hmm.
well, kind of like what I do with everything else that
Mm-hmm.
you and people are aware of. I will squeeze every
Mm-hmm.
last drop. If I see something that I like,
Mm-hmm.
I will I will go and attack it 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 more until
Well,
I couldn't get enough of the frickin' Beach Boys.
I grew up with the Beach Boys. That was the kind of music my parents listened to. So Beach Boys were playing, early Beatles were playing. Um, Mom was more into the smooth, mellow stuff, Johnny Mathis, Bobby Vinton, Paul Anka. But Dad had a rougher edge, and he started bringing home albums. And the worst thing he could ever do is play a record at home, because if I heard something I liked on a record, I'd be on that in a chair in front of the stereo with the headphones on, just jamming out, and I'd wear out his records.
I
You know.
heard Boston, the first album that came out. I don't remember when it came out,
Mhm.
but the first album I was a little kid. When?
Mhm.
In the '70s or '80s?
Boston,
Yeah.
their debut album dropped. God, I'm trying to remember. Was it 76 or 77?
Well, I was at my aunt's house, my
Hmm.
grand aunt,
Hmm.
in Little Havana, outskirts of.
Hmm.
And I have to tell you, anytime I go to her, she's passed away now, just
Hmm.
recently. She was 90 something years old.
Yeah.
One of my closest living relatives up until like a year ago.
Yeah.
Um, I was a little kid, and my mom dropped me off,
Hmm.
and she was taking care of me. She had a son, my
Hmm.
cousin, that was older, within your range
Hmm.
of timeline of age, and he had a 8 track,
Hmm.
with one of those massive with the huge dials and the whole
Yeah.
and the actual needle on the
Yeah. The VU meter. Yeah. Dun, 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 dun.
he had ELO cassettes,
Mhm,
8 tracks and whatnot. Oh, by the way, when I would walk into her house, it was like entering a different world.
mhm,
Everything was very Spanish in terms of, as opposed to Cuban flat out.
mhm,
There's a difference. Not
mhm.
much, but there. Well, actually, that's not true. Like the curtains were red
Mhm.
and with
Okay.
tapestry, or not tapestry. What's that kind of weaving that has like you can see through,
Brocade.
like crochet type thing, or I
Oh,
don't
okay. Yeah. Just lace curtains. Yeah.
laced, but like with and red, and like the soaps had little like flamenco women on. Like everything was
Mhm,
very well. She was the daughter
mhm.
of Spaniards. That's the generation that I
Yeah.
come from. A few generations, 2 generations after, but or one generation after, depending on what. But I would go there and I'd see all that, and in the midst of all that, and the curtains and the decor and just everything,
Mhm,
there was a stereo.
mhm,
My cousin would be out somewhere,
mhm,
so I'd pop. First time I popped in, what do you call it? Boston,
mhm,
and that's how I heard Boston. But I didn't pay mind to it. I was just
mhm,
there. But later it added up
mhm.
as you
Yeah.
explore. In any event, Boston was a big deal.
It was a huge deal. Yeah, the record, the debut album dropped in August of '76. Jim, I looked it up too. um, it dropped in August of '76, so summer vacation, and I started hearing this song called "More Than a Feeling" on the radio, and it was getting more and more popular, more and more popular. And when I went back to school in September, everybody was ranting and raving about that band. And that was one of those albums you had to have. You had to own that Boston album. You had to own Frampton Comes Alive. You had to own Fleetwood Mac Dreams. I mean, there were just certain albums that you had to own. And if you didn't, you were nobody. You would never be one of the cool kids unless you had all these albums. Eagles Hotel California, all of that stuff. Um, I remember my dad brought home a Creedence Clearwater Revival album. He brought home Willie and the Poor Boys because he liked the song Down on the Corner. And he played it, in the living room. I'm a little kid. But I just loved what I was hearing. And it was like 2 weeks later, he brought home a set of headphones, showed me how to plug them in. And I was in heaven. I was in absolute heaven. That was that was just what you had to do, what I had to do. And I was hooked after that.
When I was coming into my teenage years, I had had a breakup that left
Mhm.
me all screwed up because
Yeah.
it's kids and stuff. I won't forget that one. It's the same one from that video that I posted months ago, where somebody at school filmed
Mhm.
randomly, and I showed up and it's sitting talking to that ex girlfriend of mine's
Mhm.
friend, captured on film, dude. It was crazy. I'm looking at myself being like all sorts of heartbroken. Anyways, I had met this other girl through a friend of mine that happened to be his cousin, and she was this little button of a. She was like a gypsy. She wore gypsy
Mhm.
um like skirts.
Mhm.
She was all into not gothic. It was just more like almost edging on hippie
peasant
stuff.
peasant type stuff.
No, it was more like a hippie type stuff.
Mhm.
It was
Yeah.
amazing. Um,
Mhm.
from my point of view, it was
Uh-huh.
amazing. And we started dating. And one day I went over to her house, and I can't. But here's the point of the story. But she put on a record,
Mhm.
and it was the first time I had ever heard of Mungo Jerry.
Oh, Summertime, yeah.
She put on Summertime,
Hmm.
and I sat there, couldn't believe. Look, okay, so here's the scene.
Hmm.
I'll never forget this.
Hmm.
We were in her house,
Hmm.
in her parents' house, left there in the living room.
Hmm.
The mom was there and the grandmother was there, but they were it just was crazy.
Yeah.
And then she said, "Oh, I got you got to hear this."
Hmm.
And she pulled out this record.
Hmm.
She put it in, and then it started playing. And
Hmm.
you have to understand, me as a teenager,
Hmm.
I'm looking at her with this gypsy dress, just incredibly wonderful,
Hmm.
and she's playing this music that is so mind blowing to me. In conjunction, I said, "It doesn't get any better." Like, I
Yeah.
looked at this scenery and I'm saying, I'm going out with her and listen to what she's listening to. That I really like. The whole universe converged at that very moment. I was like, "Holy smokes!
Yes,
What
the
the
universe loves me.
I was like, what the heck is this? It was like amazing. In
Mm.
any event, Mungo Jerry had this jug band type
It-
deal.
I was just getting ready to go there. If you listen to that tune, that's it, on the surface. If you just give it a pedestrian listen, yeah, it's got some catchy lyrics. But if you listen to that, there
And
was
they're
only
British.
one real musical instrument in that tune, and that's that banjo.
But
The rest of it is washboard, spoons, jug,
and they're British,
uh-huh, a
which
whole bunch of just non-instruments turned into instruments that make that song.
they sound more American than many American bands.
Yeah, they do. I mean, they scored big time with that tune because that was another one of those songs that you couldn't get away from when it came out. But I liked it.
I loved it.
It was just a happy, happy song.
I
Yeah.
mean, you know, there's a
Hmm.
lot of that. Like Eric Clapton is quintessentially
Sure.
English.
Hmm.
Um, but and it's true what you said.
Hmm.
I don't disagree with that. Using Eric Clapton as an example,
Hmm.
he's as blues as can get. However,
Yeah.
there's a little essence in there that harkens back to that synergy
Hmm.
of that back and forth
Hmm.
relation between the U.S. and
Hmm.
the UK,
Yeah.
and so you can hear a trickling dust of that, but yet when Eric Clapton talks
Hmm.
to sort of like
Hmm.
agree with you, he's not posing as anything other than British.
Hmm.
But when he turns on to
He's a blues guy.
right, so there's a difference in
Yeah,
language there that crosses borders.
exactly. But if you look at who his idols were and who he listened to, I mean, you're talking Howlin' Wolf, Bessie Smith, Sister Loretta Tharpe. I mean, you're looking at he was listening to the real deal, Muddy Waters. Those were the people that he looked up to.
He
And
left the Yardbirds. I'm sorry, go ahead.
well, during a couple of, I don't remember which interview it was with, he said he really struggled for a long time in the 60s because he was trying to be rock and roll, but he could not run away from the fact that he was just a blues guy at heart.
You can't deny
Hmm.
if you're an artist,
Hmm.
you can, but you're betraying yourself. It depends because there's people that are for hire, they're for hire.
Hmm.
But if you're someone that's after a goal,
Hmm.
which is following your muse
Hmm.
under the category of music, if you're a guy from Alaska
Hmm.
and your soul is touched by Caribbean salsa music, it doesn't matter how many igloos you've built, your arrow points towards the Caribbean because something inside you tells you to
Yeah,
do it.
yeah. I mean, and we see that all the time. How many West Coast people go into country music? and
Yeah.
country is not huge out here. You know, you've got people like Harry Connick Jr., who was raised in basically the birthplace of the blues and Elvis, but he's more classically trained and he's more into jazz.
No, he was born in Louisiana. He's a
That's what I mean. I mean, you know, Louisiana, Mississippi, that area, that is the birthplace of the blues. That whole area there.
a side note
Hmm.
that I have to bring in because Canary Islanders are part
Hmm.
of that music history
Exactly.
embedded in it,
Hmm.
and that can be invested. However, it's never highlighted. But the earliest recordings included descendants of the Canary Islanders that came.
Hmm.
That's how enshrined, although not much known, because it falls into that Creole
Hmm.
world where it's a bunch of cultures coming
That whole
together.
melting pot in there, yeah.
So it no longer has this. I mean, they do have their own specific, but within the broader mix, they're all in there.
Yeah.
But even they have so all this mixing of different little
Hmm.
things. If you feel it, you feel it.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. Um, Al Kilroy's Odessa woodworking shop said, I was not one of the cool kids, but I still have those albums. Go figure, Mark. Well, maybe you were cooler than you know there, Al. But my point in that was if you didn't have those albums, there was no way you could be considered cool. It was not guaranteed you were going to be cool. But if you didn't have those albums, there's no way you'd be considered. You just didn't make the list. And
Yeah.
you damn sure didn't have a chance with any girls.
By the way, I heard this on strangely enough. Not that I'm. I heard this on Pierce Morgan's Uncensored.
Hmm.
Sometimes I like Pierce Morgan, sometimes I don't. It depends on whose side he's on and if I agree with that side or not. But in any event, uh, he was talking to a guest, and a fact I haven't double checked, but they
Hmm.
said it there, so loosely I'm saying,
Hmm.
and they mentioned that right now,
Hmm.
that famous lady that's at the top of the pops now,
Taylor Swift, yeah.
Swift,
Hmm.
has sold more than the Beatles.
Hmm.
In other words, but they said it, she's bigger than the Beatles.
In terms of popularity now, yes. Worldwide, yes. Her latest album broke every record that was out there the first 24 hours that it was out. Something like 300 million album downloads the first 24 hours, something like that. I don't remember the numbers. Not my style of music. As far as I know, I've never listened to a complete Taylor Swift song and I couldn't name one, but more power to her. She found her audience, and if they like her stuff and they're willing to buy her albums and her merch and go to her concert, more power to her. You
When I
know?
was out in California and getting ready to cross country come back,
Hmm.
sometime earlier in the year prior, I was over at acquaintance's house over there,
Hmm.
and there was gifts around the tree, and as is apparently typical of American Anglo
Hmm.
custom during Christmas. I don't know that this is so much true in the Spanish world necessarily. I never
Hmm.
saw that,
Hmm.
but I did see it various occasions with friends and such.
Hmm.
If you go over to the house, you're leaving with a gift as tiny as an extra. It could be something as simple as some sort
Hmm.
of food gift or
Hmm.
wrapped up, or
Yeah.
in this case, tell me if that's accurate or not. That's sort of kind of common, or Some people do it. I don't know if most people do it, but that's something that's not
It,
odd. That's
it depends. If you are invited for Christmas dinner, there is usually a gift for you involved.
right. Not everybody
But
around the
if
block.
you drop over on Christmas Eve to say howdy to your buddy and gonna run off and go to the store or something like that together, no, that's. But if you're there for Christmas dinner, there's gonna be a gift for you of some kind of little thing.
I encountered that a few times.
Hmm.
I assume that it's something that at least it leans towards, but that makes sense what you're saying because it's. I mean,
Hmm.
how much are you going to spend?
Well,
Even
don't
as
want you to
much
feel left out. Everybody else is open to their gifts. Don't want you to feel left out and show you some love.
as much goodwill as one may have, the
Hmm.
pocketbooks go so far. So
Sure.
there is a thing, but yes, I left with uh, what was her name? Um, Shania Twain.
Hmm.
It was wrapped. I didn't know, but I opened it up,
Hmm.
and it was like Shania Twain back to back
Hmm.
from that era,
Uh-huh.
and in it had that song "Let's Go Girls." Dun, 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 dun,
I
dun,
was
dun,
gonna
dun.
say, you mean to tell me you weren't rocking that cassette in your car heading back to California, heading
So
back
that's what I
from
was.
California?
So that's what I was gonna say. I had brought my whole collection of songs, but
Mhm,
somewhere along the way, I popped it in, and I'm driving down across America,
mhm,
and the song plays.
mhm.
Let's go, girls! Dun-dun-dun-dun-dun. It was such. Now here's the thing, it was geared towards. It's a good album,
Uh-huh.
but it's an unexpected combination of things. But I was open minded to listen to it, and I liked it for what it was within the context of this
Sure.
scenario. I'm driving across America with this thing. I mean, I wasn't hearing it on repeat, but that's not the point. On my travel,
Mhm,
I remember listening to that song due to
mhm,
that scenario,
mhm.
and I also remember listening to Lyle Lovett. All
Okay.
the other songs I can't quite recall,
Mhm,
but I remember on my way back
mhm,
Shania Twain, although I listened to a bunch of them,
mhm.
and on my way out at some point, I think is when I was entering Texas or something, I said, "Oh, this is the perfect time to put in Lyle Lovett," because what I liked about Lyle Lovett
Mhm.
is that within, let's call it, let me call it loosely American roots music, because what Lyle Lovett, I don't know if you've listened much to Lyle Lovett, but
I've heard a little bit, but I've never owned one of his albums.
he's freaking awesome. Um, Lyle Lovett will touch on, let's call it jazz,
Mhm,
very awesome done, and then he'll touch on country,
mhm,
very awesome done, and then he'll touch on folk and rock and roll.
mhm.
But he'll do it in such a way that it just gets you. It's really good. Anyways, he has an album, a double album called, I forget, but in it is one song that's called something to the effect of bears, or sometimes you eat the bear, sometimes the bear eats you. It's
You, right.
freaking awesome, dude. The way he sings it,
Mhm,
and he touches on American. I want to call him American because that's what else are you going to call them. He touches on these reoccurring American themes that pop up across our lifetimes, that might just be around the bend in some wooded area somewhere by a campfire,
mhm.
and a theme that glues together the whole thing, at least in the imagination, but actually in reality too, I guess, to a point. And it's such a freaking awesome double album. And I was driving across Texas listening to that. Freaking awesome. So those are the two albums, but whatever.
Yeah. I've not listened to Lyle Lovett much, but you're talking about that Shania Twain song. I don't even remember what they were selling, but there was a commercial. And this has been quite a ways back. It was about not long after that song was popular. It had, kind of fallen out of style a little bit, but it was still out there.
I think it became a shampoo song or something.
Well, but it was three guys in a car. And the two guys, that song is on the radio, and the two guys up front are just, straight. And the dude in the back is just jamming his ass off, singing at the top of his lungs the whole damn thing, and just rocking out to it and everything. And they get to that one part where he she says, "Man, I feel like a woman," and he's right there with her, you know. And the friends kind of look at each other, look straight ahead out the windshield again, don't even acknowledge the guy in the back seat. When you first brought that up, that commercial came into my brain, and I'm imagining you cruising through Texas on your way back to Miami, bouncing to that tune.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's odd because the themes of the song, but you can't deny Shania Twain's freaking abilities.
Oh no, no,
And
no, 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 no! The girl's got a voice. I'm the girl. Good grief, the woman's got a voice.
I
So,
listened to one of the key people, my aunt,
mhm,
I've told you before, was always on the edge of
mhm,
what was happening and what had come before. So she'd always pop in music.
mhm,
I found out about Simon and Garfunkel through her. I found out about Nina Simone through her. When Sade was
mhm.
famous or popular, something that you wouldn't quite pay attention to as a kid
Right.
listening to heavy metal, but the fact that I looked up to my aunt culturally
Mhm.
because she seemed to be on the verge of art, on the verge of all the
Yeah.
things, and I always tell her that, even to
Mhm.
this day,
Yeah.
and she's always surprised. What? And I said,
You
yeah.
remember that?
No, and sometimes she says, I don't remember that. The point is that from my
Mhm.
perspective,
Yeah.
she's receiving input of what how I saw her,
And the influence that she had on you.
and that she didn't quite like figure on, but yeah,
And
she
you
was
never know.
important
Mhm.
on a cultural level.
Mhm.
Um, and so I listened to things like Nina Simone
Mhm.
from her, and I was like, wow.
See, I picked up that up from living in the barracks, in the army. You have people from all over, and you walk past one barracks room and there'd be, Ted Nugent playing. Then you walk past another one and there's the Grateful Dead. Then you walk past another one and there's Sade. And then you walk past another one and there's, oh God, I mean, you name it. Just bands I couldn't name or performers I couldn't tell you about. Prince would be playing off over here. So you pick up a lot of that. And I don't care who you are, if it's good and you like it, it doesn't matter who did it. It doesn't matter what genre. I think people, I don't know, something I'm kind of picking up watching videos mainly and talking to other people. People are too hung up on what genre a song is nowadays. They put a lot of emphasis in, well, what would you call the genre of this to? Doesn't matter. Do you like it? Well, yeah. Okay, then. That's good enough. Doesn't matter. There's some country songs that I just absolutely love. Most of them, I can take it or leave it. It's background music.
You know why I don't like the Rolling Stones? I've told you many times,
Mhm.
and I've agreed that
Mhm.
it's such a shallow basis to say so,
Mhm. But
or
still, but
to
still,
dis-
you know what you like and you know what you don't like, and I'll never tell anybody their opinion is wrong.
yeah, uh, but for the purposes of what I'm getting at here, it's still, you have considered it shallow. I haven't disagreed with you on it. I mean, I've
Mhm.
defended my point.
No, you've absolutely admitted I know it's shallow, but this is it, and I'm like, okay.
Well, and I do agree they have great songs,
Hmm.
but when I listen to them, the problem that I have. I picture,
That visual,
and it
yeah.
ruins it. I can't listen to, like, Brown. What's this? Brown. What's the song? My coffee.
Brown
What,
sugar.
yeah, Brown Sugar, and which is great.
Hmm.
And I'm listening to it. I try. You know what I try to do? Like the last few times I've listened to it,
Hmm.
I try to erase every image, and I can't do it because his freaking lips stick out, and and then his
I
wagging around. And by the way, so that's how that is.
I
But why
don't
is
own. Go
but
ahead. I'm
why
sorry.
No, I'm sorry. Let me just say the contrast. But why is it that Culture Club
Mhm.
I totally dug and didn't have the same problem and don't have the same problem? And that's an extreme case.
Yeah,
Why?
I don't know. You're the only one that can answer that.
I
I
think it's
really don't know.
because what's his name from Culture Club?
Hmm.
He's not trying to. I hate to say this. He's not trying to fool anybody.
Uh-huh.
Meanwhile, back at the ranch.
Yeah.
Anyways, continue. I'm sorry.
Well, I don't own a single Rolling Stones album. That I've always considered them to be kind of there. You know, they got some good music, they got some music, but the one tune whenever it comes on, I will always turn up is "Gimme Shelter." Even people that don't like that band like that tune. It's just a kick-ass song, and that's all there is to it.
You didn't like how I introduced your saying in there. I felt like I used it like a little instrumental.
Yes, and I gave it a nod, and it was right there.
Within the mess that I was creating, I said let
But
me land because I feel that it's a nice little, in a poetic way,
but I figured if I dwell on it,
it ruins it.
it ruins it. Exactly, ruins the impact. So gave it a nod. And okay, message received.
See, that's an example of how you pick up something from someone
Hmm.
because it's not an outrageous saying in terms
Hmm.
of what I mean by outrageous is beyond the pale,
Hmm.
which is another saying. Like outside of like, but it's something that I would never have used prior.
Uh-huh.
But yet, it has so many awesome applications that I fit it in little ways, and it's such a great additive to my my whole. So
You
now
want to
I
tell
have that.
the people what you're talking about?
Um, Meanwhile, back at the ranch, as a
Yep.
saying,
Uh-huh.
is a nice way of turning that steering wheel or hitting it in
Hmm.
reverse and returning to your parking space where you began the whole thing,
Hmm.
and then dropping the groceries off, and
Yeah.
saying that's what I meant, and that's the contrast, and we're
Hmm.
done with this one. It's great.
Yeah. My the mental image I get with that is going back to my childhood. The Batman TV series with the narrator. Meanwhile, at Commissioner Gordon's office,
Gotcha.
and there was a quick cut, and sometimes the little spinning Batman logo. They zoom out of one location and go into the next location. And so that's where I get that. But meanwhile, back at the ranch, it's pulled away from the cowboy riding into town, and we go back over here to the ranch. And the bad guy is tying the girl up and going to throw her down the well or whatever. Just
Talking of
it's
Batman,
switch of scene.
in 1989,
Mm-hmm.
ever since that Batman series from the 60s,
Mm-hmm.
there had not been something such as a Batman movie. And Michael Keaton was and Nicholas or Jack Nicholson
Mm-hmm.
as the Joker was going to
Joker.
star in the.
Mm-hmm.
It just so happens in that year, before it came out, my family and I went on a cross America trip,
Mm-hmm.
and it was awesome.
Yeah.
We went everywhere, all the way up to Washington, D.C.,
Mm-hmm.
and so many different sundry locations across the United States. Um, it was awesome. Anyways, I remember the travel, of course. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
but I remember that I knew that when I'd come back,
Mm-hmm.
I had a brand new Batman movie that was going to come out and that I knew I was going to see.
Mm-hmm.
The combination of knowing that something that I had so long wanted, and plus we're traveling across America, enjoying the different sites,
Mm-hmm.
was like a trifecta or or two level awesomeness. And I posted a picture the other day of my mom and dad standing next to the San Marcos
And
castle
the
fort,
one you took the picture?
the one that I took the picture of.
Yes, saw that.
That was that and I have other pictures there. In that trip, but I was feeling that vibe. I was any place and every place that was awesome, but at the same time, it's so weird how kids. At the same time, I'm thinking, man, that Batman movie got because you have to understand
Hmm.
technology at the time was ripe for just crossing that threshold of now we can actually see something decent. And is it going to be comedic? It can't be comedic because it was being portrayed as something dark, mysterious, and it was the
Hmm.
Batman of the comic books that we wanted
Hmm.
that they never gave us for a decade since I was little. And now I had that expectation. So in combination to going to like St. Augustine,
Hmm.
up to Tennessee, like everything, I had that look to look forward to. It was such a blessing, such a gift from the
Hmm.
creator. Um, to have that as a memory and experience. But I wish that I could have had more knowledge or more sophistication to appreciate the places that I was with them there at,
Hmm.
to be able to really soak it in and intellectually process it. But I was a kid. I was just
Yeah.
like enjoying. My dad, "Hey, look, this is where they kept the enslaved people in
Hmm.
these cages," and say, or soldiers that went haywire or whatever you want to call it.
Hmm.
I don't know what you call it. Um, and I went into one of the cells, and I remember thinking, "Wow, this is people were here before." I remember
This is
that
creepy.
experience.
Yeah.
And little things like. But in any event, whatever.
Yeah.
Just you said Batman, and I thought of Batman.
Well, I got to admit, this kind of would show the divide. We say that we're two people, two guys from different decades, from different backgrounds, on different ends of the continent, talking about life, the universe, and everything. This is one of those differences because you were just explaining your excitement about Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson doing Batman. And I can remember when that announcement came out that Michael Keaton was playing Batman, the very first thing that popped into my mind was Michael Keaton? Because he was a comic, he was a comedian, he was doing, you know,
Stripes.
rom coms and things like that.
Was
So
Michael Keaton on Stripes, or was that the other
no,
guy
that
from
was Bill
Beetlejuice?
Murray. That was Bill Murray. But he did Mr. Mom and he did a bunch of other comedy.
No,
And
we
I
all had the
and
same. We all had the same question too, us
and I
kids.
was Michael Keaton.
No, no, we all had that same question too because we didn't put two and two.
Mhm.
And there were other better suited people we thought
Oh
back
yeah.
then.
Oh yeah. Definitely.
But but I thought it was freaking. We loved it.
I'll be honest, I never saw the movie. I was I was in the army and had kids and married and all that other stuff. I never saw the movie, you know. And it's not because we did go to the movies. We went to the movies a lot, but I just that wasn't one of them. I
Oh,
was I
trust
was
me.
more interested in Mad Max or Christine or those movies. So,
Um, Go on.
well, see, you were the comic book fan, so I can understand your excitement. I wasn't a comic book guy. So it just really didn't. It
Okay.
wasn't Adam West. That ain't Batman, you know.
Go on listing movies.
Well, that was it. I mean, God, that was so long ago. I can't remember the movies that came out around that time. I do remember Mad Max and what was the second one? Not Thunderdome. That was the third one. What was this? Road Warrior. Mad Max, the Road Warrior.
I mean,
So,
just in combination with other things. I don't
mhm.
know. I think that it was a good that trip and whatnot.
uh,
Um, yeah,
some trips are like that. I mean, when you're a kid, certain things are going to stand out. Certain other things are going to stand out, and some of the more important stuff you don't even think about because you're a little kid. I'm not interested in that. You know, um, we it was my parents and my grandparents on my mom's side. We went to this winery, the Italian, no, not Italian Swiss. Yeah, it was the Italian Swiss Colony Winery when they were down for a visit when we lived in California. And I was, oh my gosh, 8, maybe 9 years old. And I didn't give a damn about wine. I didn't care how they made it. I didn't, I was way, way, way out of my element.
yeah. A kid doesn't really
But
care
it's
about that.
one of those things where mom and dad and grandma and grandpa are going, I got to tag along with them, my brother and I both. And, but what the thing I remember about that tour, we went on a tour through the winery and everything. And of course, they had a wine tasting and all that. And my brother and I sat there bored, eating grapes and other little snacks. The thing that I remember most about it was just the sheer size of the vessels that they made the wine in and how old they were. The age, a lot of this stuff was from the 1800s and they still made it that way, and this, that, and the other. And so we're talking about the mid to late 60s. Yeah, the late 60s. And oh, these are from the 18 whatever, and these are from 18 whatever. But just the sheer size and how old everything was, that fascinated me. But probably within 5 days, it just kind of went away. And I haven't thought about that damn tour since.
Till
And
now.
you brought it back now. Yeah.
Well, that's a good
It was
thing.
just strange to me that something that old could be still being used today.
Another good reason for doing this sort of thing,
Mhm.
even at home or with neighbors, there's something to be said about sitting down with people and chit chatting
Uh-huh.
in a nice way. Now, I guess there used to be a time when that happened more, at least in my circles, um, and back. But I don't know that it happens. I guess it depends on where you're at and who you're with.
Mhm.
Um, but they say that every time you recall a memory,
Mhm.
and when I say they say, it's
Mhm.
that I've read it somewhere. Whether or not it's true, it sounds good. It doesn't sound wrong, but whatever. Every time you recall a memory, the next time you remember it
Mhm.
is referencing the last time that you recalled it.
I guess that's possible. I don't disagree with that.
Well,
I don't disagree with that. I don't know. I'd never
well,
thought about it in those terms before.
I read that somewhere, and like,
Mhm.
so, and again, I don't know if that's, but I do know that the more one, well, I don't know this either. It seems like
Mhm.
it's true. The more one remembers or retells or recounts,
Mhm.
does kind of help for things that you want to remember, reinforcing it, kind of like
Mhm.
finger memory or muscle memory when playing
Yeah.
guitar, whatever. The more you do it, the better you get, or at
Mhm.
least you remember what you did, and
Mhm.
so it sounds reasonable with the thing. I think that's kind of how it works to one degree or the other in conjunction with other things.
Sure.
But that thing that you just said now that you had not thought of since then,
Mhm.
that you just thought of again all of a sudden your from your memory bank, um, that's a little treasure trove that was hidden away, always sitting there,
Mhm. Well,
waiting for it to be plucked into your right now.
and that's what it is something will bring that up. Something will spark a memory. And you were talking about going on that trip with your folks, and I'm trying to think back of, wow, do I remember any trips like that I went on with my folks? Because we didn't do a whole heck of a lot of that. We didn't do a lot of exploring.
No, no,
We,
we didn't either.
and we didn't take long trips like that. If we went anywhere other than our little area, it was back up here to Oregon to visit grandparents. And that was about it. That was my excursion. That entire I-5 corridor between Sacramento, California, and Southern Oregon, know it like the back of my hand. I could probably do it in my sleep.
This was our American,
Hmm.
classic American road trip for our family.
The first classic American road trip I really took was with Linda when we left Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and drove out to California and then Nevada and Oregon on our way to Germany. And then the next one was coming from Savannah, Georgia. Linda and I coming from Savannah, Georgia, out here to the West Coast to pick up our kids and rounded up all of them and brought them back to Georgia with us. And all but one, the youngest one, couldn't come with us. And that was an adventure. Spend 4 or 5 days on the road with 4 teenagers in the back of your van, and you learn what togetherness is all about.
When we arrived at Washington D.C.
Hmm.
and we got a hotel room, Holiday Inn, the following morning, we were going to embark on the journey to all the different
Yeah.
memorial sites and whatnot.
Mhm.
We visited the museum and everything. My father proceeded to put on a dark navy blue shirt and in the front of it, in printed, he had this printed out. He
Mhm.
had this done. It said Cuba,
Mhm.
and then he turned around on the back, "Will be free."
Yeah.
And his hat,
Mhm.
you know those old trucker hats with the wire mesh on the back,
Yeah.
or the
The mesh back. Yeah.
it said Cuba on it.
Mhm.
And like that. And by the way, he had that made specifically,
For that trip.
intentionally for the trip, and specifically to walk around Washington D.C.
Yeah.
Because you
Well.
see, in his world, there were certain promises made
Yeah.
that he participated in.
Mhm.
The United States called, and he didn't even think twice. He just did. He
Mhm.
went. He said, "Okay, I'm here to serve."
Mhm.
That's why they never old Cuban
Mhm.
generations. You can't change that. You can't change the stripes on those
Yeah.
on those cats.
Mhm.
Not gonna happen. Now later generations, you know how it
Sure.
is.
Yeah, I
Well,
do.
I was like, Dad, because I'm a teenager. I'm a preteen, whatever that age. Like, Dad,
You're killing me here.
you're not gonna wear that. It's my mom didn't say a thing
Mhm.
because he had his mind made up.
Mhm.
To me, it's an embarrassment point.
Yeah.
Dad, this is the U.S. Dad, let's just enjoy frickin' Washington D.C. without bringing attention to us.
Mhm.
Do you have to do that? And he's like, he could care. He could care less by any stretch. Like he walked around Washington D.C.
Mhm.
Sporting that.
Yeah.
And in our pictures, I'm gonna have to scan them, and I'll put them
Mhm.
every picture. He's there with it.
Mhm.
Looking back at it now, it's a wonderful memory. But back then, as a kid,
Yeah.
you don't want that
Yeah, you
attention.
don't want no attention. You know what it reminds me of? You're talking about that. Did you ever see National Lampoon Vacation, the first one where they went to Europe? Or no, 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 the second one. They went to Europe and
Yeah,
they're in Paris, and he gets them all the berets with their names embroidered on
dude,
them.
that's a perfect. I never even thought of
And
that. Yeah,
the kid, where they're at the Eiffel Tower, and he's like, um, "Dad, I don't want to wear this," because a couple of French girls were teasing him about it.
dude, that's exactly. It was kind of exactly specifically good point.
Hmm.
Because you're a kid and stuff, but looking back at it now,
Hmm.
it's freaking awesome because it's true. It was true to him
Hmm.
and what he stood for and what he believed. Consequently, is what I believe as his offspring, my mom and dad's
Hmm.
son, and generationally. But
But that
on
was your
my
dad.
right, looking at it now, but on my account, then
Hmm. Oh yeah.
when you have the Cuban situation politically on the radio,
Hmm.
um, you tune it out because you're focused on again Van Halen,
GI Joe.
GI Joe, and all the stuff that's culturally relevant to you.
Mm, yeah.
And so in that whole mix
Hmm.
of that era, having the pictures now, but looking back, yeah, it makes it's perfect.
Yeah.
But it's taken me not until I started doing the genealogy stuff to see the panorama of how these interconnecting things, because when you're in it,
Hmm.
when you're in Miami
Hmm.
and you're of Cuban parents, all the kids your age,
Hmm.
oh, not all of them, but you get the point.
Yeah.
We're on about the business of
Yeah.
what's relevant to us as kids
Yeah. You're
growing up.
being kids. Exactly.
But now looking back, that's why I'm always like when I share stuff, I'm also in awe, self in awe. Unfortunately, my friends to whatever degree have they put up with it or enjoy it to one degree. But the point is that I'm freaking amazed because from my vantage point of what my brain processes and the way I
Hmm.
see the world is a weird halfway point, but it's not halfway, but it is a melding of cultures, but not
Yeah.
totally natural in one point, but boy, it's quite different than other people. Like what
But
our show is about, two guys from different sides of the country, and it's so. But to even ponder it and say, okay, it's actually this
mhm.
is shockingly like what?
Well,
Wow.
but see, you grow up with somebody that other kids. He lived through something that I read about in school. I didn't experience it. To me, it was the same thing as reading about anything that happened during World War II. It was something that was distant, not in the past,
Exactly.
but it
Exactly.
was something that was distant. I was completely disconnected from it.
Exactly.
He lived through it, and you grew up hearing those stories, kind of like me being half raised by grandparents that went through the Great Depression. You know, I had no connection to it. I cannot relate to it in any way, shape, manner, or form. But it sometimes still astonishes me how much of them wore off on me, and I have the same attitudes they have. I mean,
Absolutely.
we were talking before we came on, we were talking about downsizing and we're trying to get rid of stuff and this, that, and the other. And I said something about, well, there's things that we want to keep, but we have to prioritize now because we don't have the room for it. What do you keep? What do you pass on to somebody else? What do you just flat out get rid of? Because you can't keep everything, you know? And but nobody else has that connection to it. We're the only ones that do have that connection to it. And a lot of that came from being around those people. Don't get rid of that. Somebody's going to need it. And, but you can't keep everything, you know? So it's one of those quandaries. I, you
Can't
know,
keep none of it actually.
I say that as a guy who's got a stack of butter tubs right here because I won't throw the damn thing away.
I don't think that that's a good idea to throw away.
But how many do you need?
As much as can fit somewhere.
And coffee cans and a whole bunch of other. How many do you need?
But let me
Well,
tell you,
so yeah, but this little stack right here would probably last me another 6, 7 months. And
even
it
though
ain't like I'm never going to eat butter again between now and then, you know.
even though you and I are different generations,
Hmm.
we're of the same generation in a sense, in that your grandparents,
Hmm.
as I've told you before, would have been the same era as my grandparents.
Hmm.
It's just that I came later, so that means that I've got that 10-year gap or whatever, 12-year gap or whatever it is.
14, yeah.
14. It gets further and further every time I ask. Um,
No, it's still the same.
I'm being
Yeah.
silly. But I, I, I have to say that that kind of stuff rubbed off on me too. I mean, you could
Hmm.
put it on, but my family, they kept stuff like just like what you're doing,
Hmm.
and I don't know that we're an isolate. I think that many people do that because we're actually, even though we're far removed from the depression,
Hmm.
our grandparents and great grandparents dealt with that.
Right. But,
So
but
we're still too. Well, my point is that we're, even though we're far away from it in a
hmm.
sense, we're a result of that. At
Hmm.
the same time, not too far distant in the past.
Right. Well, both of your parents had their stuff taken away from them. They lost their stuff. My grandparents couldn't get the stuff because nobody had money, nobody was working, you know? So there was that sense of loss. And if you can use it, you don't throw it away. I mean, I remember my grandfather telling me he was in his 20s before he ever went out and bought brand new nails. He said a good portion of his weekend was spent straightening out nails he pulled out of boards. You didn't throw nails away because they cost. And he was in his 20s before he went out and bought nails. He thought it was just a waste of money. Why would you do that?
Just reuse the straighten them out.
And straighten them out and reuse them,
We used
you
to do
know?
that too. But my grandparents dealt with the Great Depression too, dude. It
Hmm.
was worldwide.
Yeah. Well,
It was
that's that. Yeah,
worldwide.
that's what I'm getting at. But we don't have that connection, but they rubbed off on us so much that it is one of those things. I don't like waste. I really don't like waste. You and I make things. I spite every time I throw away sawdust because I know there's a use for it. I just haven't figured it out yet, you know?
That's
So,
how it is. I mean, those are things that people do. I mean, it is.
mhm,
I've had. I know people
mhm.
that declutter to scary degrees.
Oh, yeah.
Like they'll leave a place practically with nothing there.
Hmm.
The thing about that is, it does make for a better presentation and living experience. But we're gonna
But,
put all your good stuff that you may
but,
never use, but still it's there in case. I don't know. It's just different styles of different types of thinking and viewing the world
mhm,
and necessity and such. I think that
mhm,
more people will become hoarders the
mhm.
crappier stuff gets now economically.
Well, I think there's some truth to that. There are a lot of people who are renovating, restoring, and rebuilding these days rather than buying new because, and it's not the majority of people, but it's become a big thing now to renovate an old house rather than tear it down and build a new one.
Mhm.
It is, you know, take the old kitchen scale and rather than buy a new digital one, let's rebuild and restore this one here, make it work and use it. There, try to find old cast iron pans in the thrift shops. You just can't because the minute they get one in, it's gone. People are stripping them down and reseasoning them and using them because they understand the value. You know, there's a lot of that going on.
I
And
used to
the
sell
older stuff is becoming hot again.
I used to sell cast iron skillets and such,
Hmm.
and I had never experienced what the heck even that is.
Hmm.
Because at home it was the Teflon stuff,
Yeah.
and or just plain, I guess,
Hmm.
aluminum or whatever, and
Stainless steel, probably.
stainless steel.
Hmm.
Um, but then I went to work at Lecter's.
Hmm.
Remember my boss? Her name was Sheila. She was from Pennsylvania originally, um, and then as I was learning all the different, because there's like little things to squeeze lemons,
Hmm.
um, for things to poach eggs,
Hmm.
all these things that for a guy,
Yeah.
it was cool because you're learning stuff, but at the same time I'm looking at it and I'm thinking to myself, what a freaking waste of crap. At one level, because you're a
Hmm.
guy,
Yeah.
you're thinking, all this money could be spent in, I don't know, DVDs or CDs,
Yeah.
whatever. Um, not DVDs back then. There was, you get the point.
Yeah.
VHS or whatnot. Um, and she brought out a cast iron, and she said, well, when you sell these, you have to explain to people that you have to season them. I think she said,
Hmm.
and I said, season them. You don't know. You don't know
Hmm.
what you don't know. And she
Hmm.
explained the whole process to me sounded exhausting when you can just toss some oil and just go for broke, which essentially is the, and you don't wash these and what? I mean, you clean them out.
Well, you do, but yeah, not like you would a stainless steel skillet,
Right.
but yeah.
No, you want to keep them treated and you always
Hmm.
retreat them and stuff and
Hmm.
all this whatever. The whole process she explained.
Hmm.
And I remember that's the first time I was explained that.
Uh-huh.
And once I was explained that, now I knew.
Yeah.
And it's true for every single other thing in in um in this world. Once you
Well,
learn something, more or less, you're gonna say, "Oh, well, that's how that works."
and that's one of the generational differences because like my grandmother explained to me, she cooked with cast iron exclusively. That's all she had.
Mm.
And but she learned how to cook with it when she was a little girl because that cookware was expensive. And if you had two skillets, you were doing pretty damn well. Usually you had one and you might have a soup pot and maybe a couple of baking trays. And that was generally speaking about it. And you took care of it because it was going to be expensive to replace it. So, I mean, my grandmother had a reputation for, I mean, everybody ranted and raved about how good her fried fish was. And to her, it was real simple. Mix a little bit of milk and some egg, whip it all together, mix some flour and cornmeal together, throw some salt and pepper, dunk it in the milk and egg mixture, salt and pepper, roll it in the mixture, and then put it in your skillet with a little bit with some oil in the bottom of it and cook it. She used cast iron skillet, and everybody else is trying to do it in Revere ware or stainless steel or Teflon or what have you. And they just cook completely different. It never came out as good as hers. And she thought that that was the silliest thing in the world. That why can't these people fry fish? Well, she she was using cast iron that does cook completely different.
Talking about you know not wanting things to break and such. My
Hmm.
dad, something broke. Well, in the case of, like, let's say my air conditioner.
Hmm.
Dad, it's not cooling as much. So just leave it alone. Let it work like that.
Hmm.
It's not cooling anymore. No, no, no. Just let it be.
Hmm.
Anything that broke, just don't touch it.
You're
You
gonna
know,
break it more, huh?
right, right. And it was always, you know, trying to keep things as minimal. Like, he would repair the lawnmower,
Hmm.
the AC, the TVs, because he
Yeah.
was a TV. But the point is, don't further ruin something. Stop
Yeah.
stop fiddling
Hmm.
with dials, like dials.
Hmm.
He was not having it. Dials should be left
Yep.
when, son, when you turn the TV on, don't be going like this.
Just
Like
leave it.
let let the channels change.
Uh-huh.
don't, because kids are always like this is that.
Yeah.
And
Brrrt. My dad would do that too. Brrrt. Knock that off. What? I'm supposed to go click, click, click. Yes.
yeah, because these mechanical things,
Hmm. Would wear out. Yeah.
yeah. So there was always that notion.
Uh-huh.
These are things that we know still and have to deal with today,
Yeah.
but not at the level that we did with all the items that we
Yeah.
did back then.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you put in the VHS at one point,
Hmm.
son, and I'm paraphrasing scenarios.
Hmm.
He would you introduce,
Gently push it in.
yeah, but kids are always
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
all that comes from experience, but
But
also
again,
you don't.
it was again that mentality of you got to take care of it if you plan on having it for any length of time.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
So I
So
mean, come on, we're in a digital scenario now,
yeah.
but
A lot of that is harder to do, but I mean, you can ask Linda about how many times I didn't want to buy a lawnmower. I didn't want to buy a new lawnmower. And the number of lawnmowers I got for $5, I went and picked up for free and then went down and got the parts to fix them, get them started, and use them. And finally, I broke down and bought a brand new lawnmower about 6, 7 years ago now, and it's still humming right along. You know, Jim just said something here. The wonderful experience of having a kid put a peanut butter and jam sandwich into the VCR. Did you ever do that or
no,
anything like that?
no.
Some friends of ours over in Germany, Jim, you'll like this one. She didn't put the girl was, oh, 4, maybe 3, 4. She didn't put a peanut butter and jam sandwich into the VCR. She put it, she put in a Pop Tart. It fit and it closed, and that VCR never worked again. She put a Pop Tart, and I don't remember what flavor.
I mean, yeah, it's cool though to recall those things, and I've been doing that, as you know, for a while. Plus things that I never knew had happened. I'm pacing now. Go ahead.
But you never see. You were an only child, so you didn't experience the whole "who did this." You never got to experience that.
None of that, and I was always very to myself in terms like my friends. I'd go hang with
Hmm.
my friends all the time, where they'd come
Yeah.
over, but I didn't experience like ownership problems between
Mhm.
siblings.
Yeah. Or taking the blame for his sibling. It all comes around. I mean, my brother got his butt pedaled for things I did, and I got my butt pedaled for things he did. But some things you just couldn't blame other people on. Like I remember he was about 3, and he took a bottle of my mom's perfume. And I don't remember what perfume it was, but I remember the smell to this day. And he dumped about 2/3 of the bottle of perfume on the dog.
That's bad.
And that poor dog reeked. For that poor dog got bathed every day for a week and still smelled like that perfume for a month. And there was no, well, Mark did it because she could smell it on him. She knew who did it, you know?
Busted, disgusted, and couldn't be trusted.
100%, you know?
Was that a saying that you ever used as a
Oh,
kid?
yeah, busted, disgusted, and cannot be trusted, usually towards other people, you know?
Yep.
So, oh,
See,
yeah.
see how that traveled cross country through
Mhm.
generations.
There is a, um,
How's that work?
well, there's a YouTube channel out there called, oh God, I'm going to get it wrong. It's a history channel. I'll have to think on this a little bit, but it's a guy who draws stick figures, and he explains things about history. And he went off on a little rant um, about some of these slang terms and where the hell they came from. Like he couldn't figure out. He went on a serious rant about why did they call punching somebody getting socked. I don't understand that. You're talking about I am going to do something to inflict heavy hurt on you with the softest thing known to man.
Can I guess? I don't know
Go
what
ahead.
the answer is. See if it's true or not.
Okay.
I picture, and it doesn't have to be the scenario. I picture putting rocks or something in a sock, and maybe in prison or something like that, so that you can get one over on someone and pay damage to them. That's kind of the first thing that I go to.
And that's exactly where it came from.
That's
They
crazy.
would take anything from a rock to a potato to a couple of chunks of metal, a couple of lug nuts or what have you, put it in a sock and didn't have to tie it, just wham. And that was getting socked. And it later turned into just being punched. That's where that came from. And now it's going to drive me crazy what the name of that YouTube channel was. And I'm going to look it up while we're discussing it here. It's going to, it's one of those things that it's not really that important that I tell anybody the name of this channel, but it's going to bug the stuffings out of me until I find out for myself. And in fact, I've got another YouTube channel to talk about as well. By God, what was it called? Um, if you have anything to chime in, feel free to chime in while I scroll through my history.
Um, that's not how that works, Mark.
Oh, come on.
It's got to be natural, dude. You can't force that. It's like forcing
Well,
someone to hear 5 hours of frickin' back-to-back Rolling Stones.
okay, a guy can try. Um, the Salmonella Academy. Sam O. Nella, as in Irish. Salmonella Academy. Talking about slang words and where the hell did they come from. And that was one of them he couldn't figure out. So, oh,
Well,
Linda
that's a
reminded me of an unpleasant one. Remember the self propelled machine you got in Georgia? Then you ran over the nut on the light pole. Yeah, it wasn't just the nut. Nice self propelled lawnmower. First brand new lawnmower I ever bought. I finally broke down. It was on clearance at the PX, the Army General Store, basically. It was on clearance. They were getting rid of that model and it was self propelled. No more pushing a lawnmower. It's going to tow me around. And we had this big parking lot light stanchion in our front yard in Hawaii and had four big bolts stuck up out of the concrete base. It had huge nuts on it. And usually there's a little cast cover that sits down and covers those bolts so nobody falls on it and skewers themselves. It got away from me. It grabbed hold. I'm coming around the corner doing just fine, and it grabbed hold and it kind of got away from me and it jumped up onto that concrete stanchion and the blade came down and hit that bolt. And it's about, oh hell, it was bigger around than my thumb anyway. And it stopped that engine like right now. Ah, crap. So I flipped it over and looked at it, and the blade is sitting there just bent. And it bent the shaft on the crankshaft, on the engine, bent the crankshaft. And it's like, well, that's now toast. Oh, I was so mad. Oh, I was mad.
I used to break the rope on the lawnmower, the
Yeah.
pull to start. My dad come out and fix it.
Mm.
He come in. He says, "Son, just do it, but firm, but not, don't go crazy."
Yeah.
And I go, and I break it, and then he come back out. And by the way, and he'd give me,
And it would get
um,
shorter and shorter and shorter.
he would give me change for these activities. But thinking back at it now, like cutting the lawn and such, it probably cost him way more.
Well, that's why you only got change. That's why you didn't get a couple of bucks. Because now I got to go buy more rope.
Yeah, it's it's one of those things, but fond memories.
Mhm.
It's an amazing thing to think of
Mhm.
all those things. On a side note, I and I know you don't. I've told you about it, but you don't like it, and I don't want to beat a dead horse. But um, as far as brand new era of
Mhm.
current times now, um, and I know there's a lot of controversy with Netflix and such in some
Mhm.
occasions and whatnot. But man, they produced some pretty freaking great movies, and I just say that I've been rewatching for the first time in a few years,
Mhm.
um, Stranger Things,
Mhm.
and I know you said when I told you about the thing, you said
Yeah, I've
you
heard of it, but I haven't seen any of it. Yeah.
it's got a Stephen King vibe to it,
Mhm.
but it's so well done.
Yeah.
It's such a great story, and what I like about it is that it has the themes of the things of the '80s because it's set in the '80s,
Mhm.
and it reminds me of growing up. You know what would have happened with Friends, except this is a movie that has Stephen King type
Mhm. Yeah.
supernatural stuff involved, but the decor, the layout, the music played, all that,
Mhm.
and that kind of stuff is cool. Um,
Mhm.
like I like it, I enjoy it, so I've been enjoying that, and I think it's such a well produced thing,
Mhm.
series, and they have a few of those like that. There's people still doing good stuff.
Yeah.
It is subjective, but it did become a hit.
It,
That series, like
mhm.
with people dressing up as some of the characters, and like it became a thing, um, due to so many people having access to the Netflix whatnot.
Mhm.
Um, but
You
are
just
there
have
any?
to know where to search for it, I guess.
Yeah, and some things touch a nerve
Mhm.
with certain amount of people, and I think that as far as what I've heard, a lot of kids are into it,
Mhm.
but it also applies to people of the older generation and such. Um, but how that happens in such a noisy environment that we live in today, with all this
Mhm.
being flung at you at the same time, um, it's not that it's a mystery because you just show
Well,
commercials and whatnot like you would anyhow. But
people want diversion. They don't want real life. They want diversion, you know.
yeah,
And so they're going to gravitate toward what entertains them. I've heard several people make the comparison that it was kind of like the modern era's Harry Potter, in that it was a fantasy world that was completely different from reality, but it had something that just about everybody could relate to as well as being entertaining. That's what I've heard about it. Like I said, I've never watched it myself.
it's not Harry Potter. So I'll just say, there's a small town in America somewhere.
Hmm.
I think it's Indiana, or it could be.
Yeah.
It's probably Indiana or something. A regular American town,
Hmm.
and there's kids playing their D&D like we did,
Hmm.
literally. And then a boy goes missing.
Hmm.
There's a lab close by, a facility
Hmm.
run by the government or a surrogate of the government,
Hmm.
and they're running certain extra paranormal experiments.
Right.
And there's these gifted type kids
Hmm.
that they snatch from their families and never to be heard from again. They hide them there, and nobody in the town knows that.
Hmm.
But this kid goes missing
Hmm.
because some sort of portal had opened up because one kid escaped from the facility, and then stuff starts happening little by little, crescendoing, and the interaction of the policemen. That's a typical 1980s hat
Hmm.
wearing policeman. The interactions with like the kids at school, all the little hat nods
Hmm.
to the era in the
Hmm.
context of a paranormal
Yeah.
adventure is pretty freaking sweet. Yes, you have to suspend disbelief, obviously, but
Well, it's fantasy. And
yeah,
and my comparison was in that regard. I wasn't trying to suggest that it followed any kind of plot line or setting or anything like that.
Right,
But
right.
it was, if you remember how big a phenomenon Harry Potter was,
Yeah.
20, 25 years ago, which pains me to say that. God, it's
Is
around
it that long
20.
ago?
Yeah, yeah, about
I feel like it
20
just
years
came
ago.
out.
I know. To me, it kind of feels like last month, but um, you had a whole generation grow up just absolutely loving that kind of thing. Now, I'm not suggesting Stranger Things made as big of a splash or was as popular, but it's kind of similar in that so many people got into it. It's kind of like Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones, so many people were into it,
Yeah.
and so many people just absolutely loved it. It became the Harry Potter of the time.
Game of
And
Thrones is a serious contender of awesomeness.
yeah, and so, but that's what I'm getting at. It's 100% fantasy. There are some things in there that people can relate to, interactions between people and family dynamics and other things. But there are some things that are relatable, but it's basically fantasy, and that. But it's escapism.
Mhm.
It's
Entertainment.
getting away from real life and just being entertained. So if you're entertained by Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, you're going to be drawn to something like Stranger Things, especially with other people talking about it.
Oh yeah.
So, I mean, but there were all kinds of others that are like that. And I say great, I never got into oh my god, now I can't think of um the Walking Dead. I never got into oh my god, what was it? The name of it. Um I can see Breaking Bad. Couldn't think of the name of that damn
It
show.
started good at one point, but then they started getting into family life.
Hmm.
And in the context of that series, which by the way, for the first few, maybe the first season,
Hmm.
was freaking primo awesome.
Hmm.
Really, it was really well done. But then for some reason it got into the subplots
Hmm.
that I
That's
didn't, and I stopped.
That's the problem with a lot of these. They go off into these side plots and everything. A lot of good shows have been ruined by that, or they try to insert a romance into it or something. Turn it into a soap opera, and it's like, oh my god,
I mean,
you know.
there is good stuff coming out
Hmm.
all the time because there's a lot of people doing stuff
Sure.
in the art or entertainment
Hmm.
industry, movies, such. But there's key things I could pluck out that I could say would rival
Hmm.
things that came prior,
Yeah,
um, very easily. And then there's a whole bunch of garbage, and I
but
guess
if
that's always
you
been true.
but if you look at the more successful today, they tend to harken back to what was out there previous.
That's
I don't
true.
mean I don't mean plot lines. I mean style.
Yeah,
You know, it,
that's true.
it's and it just works. It just works.
You've never seen a Quentin Tarantino movie in your life, right?
I I don't know. If you listed off a bunch of them, maybe I have. I don't know. Um,
Um,
Anything made after about 88, probably not.
yeah, man, that's some good stuff. He has talking about leaving all the other ones. His last one was kind of a strange thing. No pun intended. We just talked
Mhm.
about Stranger Things.
Yeah,
Um, it was called Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
I've heard of it, but I've not seen it.
It's a pretty long movie, and
Hmm.
he takes indulgences in what he does because he's a true artist in my opinion. In the cinematic universe, in
Hmm.
terms of everything is really well thought up, thought
Thought
thought up,
out. Hmm.
thought out, and he films it in ways that are completely interesting all the time. Just
Hmm.
about like it just really rolls. In any event, in this Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Um, he goes back to the '60s
Hmm.
when he grew up in the Hollywood that he remembers. He wrote the script to pay homage to his growing up, which I find completely awesome.
Hmm.
It's not my favorite of his films
Hmm.
because what it is a unfolding of two actors living in Hollywood in the '60s.
Hmm.
One of them is a body double, Brad
Hmm.
Pitt, and the other one, Leonardo DiCaprio, is the star.
Hmm.
And the whole thing revolves around the star Leonardo, his stardom waning,
Hmm.
um, trying to get roles and all this and that, how the industry works. But at the same time, they run into the Manson family.
Hmm.
It's all make believe, but he rewrites history
Hmm.
in order to have the Mansons get their just dues,
Hmm.
and it's pretty freaking good. But there's a lot of filler stuff, in my opinion. It's not, but in any event, even there, it's kind of like an experimental movie, but it's very well done, and you get to see L.A. through his eyes back in the '60s.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, I think it's worth a watch, just like all his movies. Very
Okay.
artistically, interestingly done.
Yeah, I've heard about it, but I've not seen it. I know it was talked about quite a bit a couple of years ago. But I mean, the list of movies I have not seen is 100 miles long. But the list of movies that I have seen are probably about the same length. But the thing is, I I was a student of the old black and white movies.
Yeah,
I liked I liked the old dramas and comedies. I mean, 12 o'clock high. They were replaceable, or they were expendable. World War II movies, the Guns of Navarone. That's fairly recent. I mean, that's 1960s, but that's not super recent. But compared to what I was watching before that, um, yeah, It's a Wonderful Life, things like that. That's what I was brought up on. Marx Brothers, Martin and Lewis, Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn, and that kind of stuff. And so that's where my interest kind of stayed. There were a few good movies that came out in the 70s, but to me, most of the movies that came out in the early to mid 70s were just a pile of trash. I just wasn't interested in them because everybody was trying to be edgy. Everybody was trying to go for that shock value. I think the last decent movie to come out of Hollywood in that time frame, and this was 69, was Rosemary's Baby. And that was the talk of the whole country. How shocking of a movie that was. And it was, by today's standards, very tame, very tame. But it wasn't an attempt to see who could make the biggest explosion and that kind of thing. I don't know. Today's movies remind me more of a theme park
video
ride,
game.
a video game or a theme park ride. Yeah,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
And then, not that there's anything wrong with that. Everybody likes a good science fiction flick
It's exhausting for me though.
or a good fantasy flick.
It's
And
exhausting for me.
yeah, if that's your thing, then that's your thing. Like I said, I'll never tell anybody that their opinion is wrong. If you like something, you like it. If you don't like it, you don't like it. But so when it comes to current movies, I'm not very good at them.
There's a lot of good stuff that does come around, but you have to take a chance on it.
Hmm.
And sometimes, like I'll find myself more browsing
Hmm.
than actually watching stuff. I was like, nope,
Yeah.
nope, 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 nope. And a contender
Hmm.
or rival is regular people like you or me,
Hmm.
or the folks doing YouTube videos talking about any random thing.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
just as valid
sure, it
as a
is.
full blown
And
production.
hopefully it's as entertaining, ourselves notwithstanding. But by God, yeah, I
Yeah.
do want to watch. I'll give you an example. And this is a YouTube channel I think you would be interested in. It's called XKCD's What If? And it's a video series of short videos. I think the longest one here is 4 minutes 23 seconds. No, there's one for 4 minutes 30 seconds. But it's what if? What if everybody on Earth jumped at once? You
No,
know, what if the Earth suddenly stopped spinning?
not
What
good.
if you threw a baseball at nearly light speed? What if we aimed the Hubble telescope at work? Most of these videos end with the world ending, a major catastrophe.
What if we pointed the Hubble telescope scope at
At
Uranus?
Uranus, well, they do it all the time, but they also point the Hubble at the Earth all the time. They do it all the time for various calibration purposes and this, that, the other. But yeah, they pointed at the Earth.
That's what the lizard people want you to say.
You know, but most of these end with the Earth either just being done. But there was one that came out called "What Would a Magnitude 15 Earthquake Be Like?" Basically, it would destroy the Earth. A magnitude, I may be getting these numbers wrong. A magnitude 25 earthquake would destroy the sun. Okay. But then they get into, is there any such thing as a negative magnitude quake? And they said, yes, there are negative magnitude impacts and quakes all the time. For instance, like you tapping the key on your keyboard is a magnitude -5.
Is it
Yes. It
literally?
it would make an instrument jump, but there's no effect really other than that. A magnitude -15 is a random speck of dust landing on your dining room table. So, yes, there are negative magnitudes. And I thought that was interesting as hell. And what I'll do, I'll go ahead and I'll throw a link to this channel up on the Trampled Underfoot podcast Facebook page for folks to check out if they want to. And there aren't many. It's a fairly new channel. There are only 9 videos on it. You could binge watch it in less than a half an hour,
Okay.
literally. So, but there are some very, very interesting things like the baseball. If you threw a baseball at 9/10 the speed of light, it would basically create nuclear fission and make a crater, you know, 20 miles in diameter and wipe out the entire city. Because at that speed, you're creating plasma when these atoms meet the atoms in the air and this, that, and the other. And just nanoseconds after throwing the ball at that speed, the pitcher would turn to dust. The shock wave would turn the batter and the catcher into dust, and there'd be a gigantic nuclear explosion at the baseball park.
Well, this gloom and doom
Mm.
reminds me of a few things. I know it's not what you intended to, but I'll
Mm-hmm.
say. Um, Episodes back, we were talking about I don't know what this and that, and you said something to the effect of I'm not getting it right, but you know, well, you said what does that change anything for me? I still have to do X, Y, and Z in my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How does
Remember
that
that?
affect my life?
I think it was over aliens or something like that. Whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that theme And I was like, well, wait a second. There's specific things that would change,
Hmm.
and that theme has popped up recently for me when watching myself watching, because there's
Hmm.
an activity called watching the news,
Uh-huh.
but there's another activity called watching yourself watching the news.
Hmm.
A lot of people would say, well, how can you watch yourself watch the news? Right?
Self-awareness.
Isn't that, wouldn't that be an obvious question?
Sure. But
But you know
se-
where I'm going with this?
self-awareness, yes.
Self-awareness. And then that thought that you said came up
Hmm.
because they're being doom and gloom over any number of things
Yeah.
concerning political situations and that.
Hmm.
And although there's consequences if those things are true or not,
Hmm.
but the average Joe person does not have an access phone pipeline to the Pentagon to say, "Hey, wait a second, I just saw this on." So I guess my whole theme here is that watching these stories and the things that go on and the suggestions made by hosts
Hmm.
in the sense of politics or whatever
Hmm.
um, produces, or I've seen could produce, and I think does, an active role in the part of the viewer,
Hmm.
as if every choice is being put forth to the viewer,
Hmm.
as if they have any a damn thing to say about it either way,
Hmm. Yep.
which they don't. I mean,
You're along for the ride, basically.
exactly.
Hmm.
So that's perfect. So using the along for the right thing and just watching the whole
Hmm.
scenario, and I'm talking broadly, like whatever.
Sure.
And so I realized that's this thing, and that applies to what you said a while back in this and that.
Hmm.
However, I mean, that first part, that's the end of it, but just adding the extra thing.
Hmm.
However, the the, the condition of man is such that there's no way that they're not going to gossip to others and
Hmm.
to themselves and to the things that so it's a loop of a
Hmm.
scenario when it comes to all these things to do with politics or this or that, and I guess it sums up very well like that. So we're along for the ride.
Yeah, we are. We're along for the ride. It's somebody else told me this. I didn't come up with this on my own, and it made me stop and think about a number of things. Life is not a destination, it's a journey. And it's up to you as to whether or not you're going to enjoy the ride because that's all you've got. All I have is today. And I'm the one who's going to decide whether how I'm going to spend that day. Now, there may be outside forces. I might have an appointment that I need to go to. Somebody may come over and I got to go work with them for a little while. There may be things that are not within my control about it. But overall, in general, I'm the one who decides whether I'm going to be happy about it, mad about it, sad about it, or just me about it. I can't
Notice,
I can't control what happens. The only thing I can control is my reaction to it.
notice I always, after the fact, or not always, that's wrong
Hmm.
to say, but on occasion, in some sort of frequency, once in a blue,
Hmm.
after the fact, I return to something you said
Hmm.
that I found at the time pause in or acknowledgement, but I had something else to input in the
Hmm.
conversation. But notice that it didn't go awash
Hmm.
in some cases. And in the best light, I find a place to fit it in, just like those sayings.
Hmm.
like back at the ranch or whatnot. And this and that.
Meanwhile, back at the ranch.
Even though I'll be rambunctious or combative over a thing, but notice that after the fact I come around and try to introduce it in future conversations
Uh huh.
to find something applicable that I found use in what you said.
Well, thank you.
Well, wait a second. I'm actually here comes the scolding.
Here comes the but.
No, and that's true. I mean,
Yeah.
well, I try.
Uh-huh.
Well, no, because you find a truism in something,
Or you find
and
value in sometimes the
yeah,
strangest places.
and you want to recognize those things.
Hmm.
Number one, because there's an application, and
Hmm.
maybe I wasn't available to receive a proper application that I figured on. Not that it's the
Hmm.
only one, and maybe it takes a long time
Hmm.
because that's how it goes, you know.
Yeah.
But when the heck have you said, Eloy, dude, that one thing about freaking lizard people, dude, you were so freaking spot on. No, I never hear that.
Never? Not once?
I don't know. I don't remember.
Well, see, I agree with you at the time when you bring something
To
up
get it
like that.
over with.
No, 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 because I want to acknowledge it when it happens because you have come up with some profundities that I don't think you are aware of. But you'll say something and I'm like, damn, I never thought of it that way. Dude.
No, I think
And
I'm always fighting a uphill battle trying to figure
ah,
stuff out.
no, see, I acknowledge it at the time, like, damn, you're right. I never thought of it that way. That kind of thing. And I try to get it right then, right there. Because if I don't, I know me. I'll forget it till like, next February. And then if I bring it up, it's like, what the hell are you talking about? So it's like,
We
no,
also have the
acknowledge it
problem.
now.
Well, no, but we also have the problem that we've touched on before, and I think this is an important thing to consider. Is that as much as available there is to you or me to
Hmm.
think,
Yeah.
roughly, we can only properly. I mean, there's a lot of stuff, but we can kind of sort of only properly deal with one thing at a time as it comes out of. I mean, there might be some multiple thoughts coming in, and that's
Well,
true.
to any
But
level of detail, I think you're right.
right, so all other available variations on any theme, that's why the conversation is always to be continued in
Hmm.
on any given subject and stuff. And
Yeah.
but the framing. So here's the thing, going back to watching um, stuff and the
Hmm.
along for the ride thing. The problem is I'm culpable too. That's the problem, to point something out. But I'm also, that's the whole problem. But when I watch these news things, more and more, kind of also the thing that you said once before, I'm like, there's no use to this because they're focusing on X, Y, and Z, but boy, they're ignoring this situation here that would
Uh-huh.
change the outcome of what they're suggesting, at least slightly,
Yeah.
and they're paying it no mind. Is it
Mhm.
because they're not considering it? Is it because it's not politically expedient at the time, convenient? Is it because they're unaware of that option? And I'm talking broadly here. It could be any particular thing.
Mhm.
And I think to myself, are these news channels being completely on the up and up? Are they giving us a paradigm treatment? This is what we want you to think. Or are they honest explorers of the universe around them? And more, some of the people that I completely thought, man, these people are with it.
Mhm.
They're human, they're flawed, but boy, they're really knocking down walls. Well, guess what? I'm surprised at the amount of people that I have to drop down a notch on the news cycles and whatnot. And I'm not talking about the most annoying ones. I'm talking about people that you would assume that,
Mhm.
and it's really taken me aback. I thought to myself, it's insane. And I'm
Well,
being broad, but
well, you have to be broad, and I understand why, but you got to remember something that took me many, many years to figure out, and that is there's no such thing as an unbiased press. Everybody has a bias. You can't help it, and your biases can change. You know, if you're in a bad mood that day, your outlook on life is probably not going to be super, super rosy. Well, that may not be the right time to talk about a certain topic, but you're going to do it anyway because it's a burr under your saddle, and damn it, you're going to listen to me. That kind of thing. Um, it, people are people. That's why I keep constantly preaching on never accept one source for the news, because everybody has a bias. There's three sides to every story. There's side A, there's side B, then there's the truth. And usually, by examining all of the sides, you'll find the truth. Usually, not always.
I would say something approximating a semblance of a more accurate description of an occurrence, as opposed to saying the truth, um, due to the fact that, so if it's some complicated political situation,
Hmm.
um, or
Yep.
historical one for that matter,
And we may never know the truth. But
well,
if you can just give me the established facts, all of them, even if you don't like them, if you can just give me the established facts, we know that X happened. We know that this person was involved. That's all we know at this point. If you tell me that's all we know at this point, I will accept that, because that's an admission that you don't know everything. You're not going to come off and tell me like you do know everything,
yeah,
you
it's
know.
important when it comes to these things if clarity is necessary or is desired to do that.
Hmm.
Because if you don't,
Yeah.
if clarity is your intention, you will do something close to that. But
Yeah.
looking back at the, I mean, if you have that understanding available to you,
Hmm.
but some people don't have that understanding available to them, they put their trust in a news source,
Hmm.
and you build a trust, and many things go past you
Hmm.
into you accepting them as truisms
Yep.
that are not, and it culminates in
Hmm.
you having a worldview over something
Hmm.
that isn't the most accurate description of what it is. Let me let my dog out because now I know he's gonna either I let him out
Okay.
or
All right. Then when you get back, we should probably land the plane. But yeah, it's I don't know. It's a crazy world out there. We're gonna go back to lawnmowers for a minute here. Jim Dockrell says my wife ran over a tree stump with one of our lawnmowers, busted the crankshaft. I just bent hell out of it. It was a banana. It didn't break. I think it would have almost been better if it had broken, but it was basically a banana, you know. And oh man, it made me mad. I that was the first brand new lawnmower that I ever bought, and I was proud as hell of that thing. I tried to get my stepson to mow the lawn. He wouldn't do it. He wouldn't do it. He wouldn't do it. He was 18. He had a job. Okay, fine. I bought that self-propelled lawnmower. I had to pull him away from it. So, Mark, I'll mow the lawn. Kiss my ass. No, you ain't touching my new lawnmower, boy. I got back on lawnmowers for a minute.
I heard you say, "Kiss my rosy cheek."
Yeah, that's it. Then Jim had a bum moment here. My kid asked if he could have a lawnmower to make a few bucks. I said, sure. He took the mower out and sold it. Yeah, that works. You didn't tell him how he had to do it.
How's that lawn mowing business out in the desert going for you, Bob?
Yep.
Not well. I don't have a punchline for that one. I'm just saying that depending on the scenario,
Mhm.
um,
I
that's
had a
why
decent lawnmower down in Nevada. I didn't have a lawn. I would mow down the tumbleweeds once a year. you
as they
know.
rolled.
Mhm. Well, no, they grow. They have to grow somewhere. So you mow them down, and they don't. I saw the most Nevada thing one time, and I'd pointed out to Linda. We laughed at it every time we saw it. Guy had a bunch of tumbleweed growing out along his fence, and everybody had tumbleweed growing somewhere around their house. Everybody did. This guy, he upped it a notch. He went out and he trimmed to look like a perfect boxwood hedge. I mean, it had a flat top. You'd swear the guy was out there
That's
with a laser.
hilarious.
He trimmed it nice and flat on top, trimmed the sides right on. Best looking damn hedge you ever saw. And it was all tumbleweed. It was all brown and nasty, and dead, and everything. It's just like, okay, it's just waiting for the wind to blow it away. But that was hilarious to me. That is a class C practical joke. There's no target. There's no gotcha moment. It's
It's
just something.
casually.
It's just something funny out there for everybody to enjoy if they get the joke. You know.
I'm sure. I'm sure.
And did you know that there are three types of practical jokes?
I didn't know.
A class A practical joke is you have a target. I'm going to get him. A class B practical joke is don't have a specific target. I'm going to get the next person who comes along. And then a class C is the type I was talking about, just something funny out there, like a huge pile of trash with a big sign in the middle that says no dumping. You know, it's it's just something out there that'll cause a smile or a giggle, and then you move on with life. Nobody was hurt by any of that. But I just thought the guy trimming tumbleweeds to look like a boxwood hedge was perfect. It was the most Nevada thing I'd ever seen in my life.
Well,
So,
I guess we'll end.
okay, we can do that. I
We did
need
a nice little journey through, I don't know, music and
lawnmowers.
music, movies, some stuff that glued it somehow in one way or the other.
Yeah,
Um, Rewatch it and you'll know what we're talking about.
exactly. Only we could go from the Rolling Stones to a lawnmower to a tumbleweed hedge in Nevada.
That's right. If people caught on one day, we would be the next Ben and Jerry's or Laurel and Hardy or
Laurel and
one
Hardup.
a
I don't know.
duo. All right,
Yeah.
folks, we go live every Tuesday, 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific Coast time here on YouTube. Trampled Underfoot podcast on YouTube. We have a Facebook page, same name. Mark's going to post some of the things we talked about, or one or two of the things we talked about today. So
Mhm.
go visit Facebook. That's pretty interesting, and you get to see the variations and whatnot on some of the
Mhm.
topics that we talk about. And we also have a website, trampledunderfootpodcast.com. Go check that out. And we're sponsored by.
Harneal Media. You know him, you love him. He's a friend. I was going to say he's a Roman, he's a countryman, but he's not a Roman. Not
Officer and a
anymore.
gentleman.
He don't even roam out of his house anymore. Yeah, you know him, Steve at Harneal Media. You want a website. You need a website. Even if you think you don't need a website, you want a website and you want to go to Steve for your website. Trust me. There's a link to Harneal Media in every single item posted on this YouTube channel for a reason. Very competitively priced, very good at what he does. And when you deal with Harneal Media, you deal with Steve, not some nameless, faceless person in a call center that you'll never talk to again. You will deal with Steve. Check him out. Head over to Harneal Media and hit that contact us button. That's HARNEAL media.com. Sponsor trampledunderfootpodcast.com.
I was just thinking that one time you said, "Oh, Steve doesn't like when I say something." I don't forget what the word was.
Your web solution.
Oh yeah, I wonder if he wrote out a script of how it would be presented, how that would sound.
I asked him to write me one up. and he said he was going to get his partner to do it, and I'm still waiting. That was about 2 years ago.
It just popped into my. I remember you said that Steve doesn't like when I say this one line or
Mhm.
whatnot, and I was wondering. I never asked you. Did he reach out to you and tell you that?
No,
Or
he didn't, but yeah, I can feel it. It's I felt a tremor in the force. He cringes when I say that because there's a lot of things that are IT involved that he doesn't get involved with, and I can't blame him. I don't want to take that responsibility.
so you're saying that there's a aura that's so sitting from his chair somewhere in the open
Yeah.
spaces of the great that he transmits over the
Mhm.
airwaves.
Yeah, I felt the tremor in the force. I felt him spit out his lemon drop and go, I don't like that. You know, I don't
We
know if he
get an
eats lemon
essence of
drops or not, but I know he thrives on candy. So that was the only one I can come up with on short notice.
notice that we capture. There's something about human. Last thing I'll say, I gave up the partner, and I like the way you do it. Okay,
That's what she said.
that's that. That's that.
I
That
have to just once.
that what he wrote sounds like the plot to a at least R-rated movie, but we'll not discuss
Meanwhile,
further.
at the edge of town, Aunt Martha's lying in a ditch at the side of the road. Go ahead.
But it's funny or interesting how we capture the essence of people
Hmm.
um in our natural connections and stuff.
Hmm.
And there's so those same things that you said, I can connect to Steve, even though I may not think in a general sense. It's not like
Hmm.
it's and it's funny how we all capture the essence of other human
Yeah,
beings
that's what
according
I'm
to
doing with all these butter tubs. I'm capturing your essence.
yeah, I think so. There's something to, but you know what? That's a whole other discussion for now. Enjoy the rest of your week, folks,
Hmm.
and we'll catch you next Tuesday. And nothing, be good, be safe, but enjoy it. See you.
Peace. Have a good night, y'all.